just a little additional about me and this choice of play, but I have 3 questions for you, and I can barely see you out there. So how many of you were born after 1950? Okay. And how many of you have ever seen a production of Waiting for Godot? Okay. And how many of you feel that you know the plot and or crux of Shakespeare's tragedy of Hamlet the Dane? Okay, this is good. So you're sort of prepared for today. I could ask other questions, I'm not going to. I think it was during the summer of '68 that I saw Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead and Waiting for Godot. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in London and Waiting for Godot in Chapel Hill. And I was also studying right then 20th century French literature and was fascinated and intimidated by existential thinking, this naive Baptist listening to people saying that life is meaningless and the only meaning we can give it is out of ourselves. And I found that very captivating for a while. Anyway, wrestling with career choices, I started with teaching and had a final placement in teaching in a private school for dyslexic kids from age K through 9 with a spectacular stage that the North Carolina School of the Arts had borrowed for a couple of years while they were refurbishing their stage. And so in my 1 year there, I somehow or other received, unsolicited, the assignment of having every child speak on stage. And there had to have been 275, 300 students in the course of the year. And my oldest class acted in a short scene from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which I'll tell you about later. The next year I enrolled in seminary in New York City, and one of my earliest professors, his course was called The Word of God as Human Experience, was Tom Driver, who knew Samuel Beckett personally and had interviewed him, and the interview was cited by scholars all the time. So as you can tell now, you're probably going to hear a little bit about, not just about Tom Stoppard, but also about Samuel Beckett. So the play came out at the Edinburgh Festival. It's sort of a one-act play, I believe, but the theatrical heavy hitters in London, somebody saw it, and they persuaded him to make it into some people say 3-act play, anyway, to expand it. And we'll talk about that later. It's based on Hamlet from Shakespeare, and that's, you see, a long time earlier. And I think Stoppard, who is still alive, he's in his late 80s or early 90s, would probably tip his hat to Samuel Beckett for Waiting for Godot. You can almost see parallels among the characters in the two plays, even though clearly each of them stands alone. And then I couldn't help but tell you, now can anybody confirm for me that W.S. Gilbert is Gilbert of Gilbert and Sullivan? I'm pretty sure that's correct. He wrote a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and I think the date is up there, which we're not going to refer to today. But I just thought that was so interesting. The names are captivating, and does anybody know anything about what those names mean? I'm told I can't put any papers on the speaker, so I'll be careful. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me just tell you a little something about Stoppard and Beckett, because they're both pivotal for this play. Tom Stoppard was born in Czechoslovakia, and his family fled the Nazi invasion and went to, I always get this wrong, they went to India. I'm going to forget the name of the Himalayan town in India, where he, from age 4 until maybe 8, was a student in a school there. And then his father died. Turns out that actually his father was taken prisoner of war by the Japanese, and the ship sank, and he drowned then. Mrs., let's see, I had his real name for you, but I don't have it right handy. So anyway, his mother remarried, and a British man who brought them to England and repeatedly told Tom, in ways that he could tolerate, that he had given him the gift of all gifts to become a true Brit. And now, what to tell you about him? He received numerous awards, including the Academy Award, British Academy Film Award, Golden Globe Awards, and 5 Tonys in New York City. The Academy Award was first for Shakespeare in Love. He wrote Shakespeare in Love. How many saw that? I thought so. That's a wonderful film. And then his Tonys were for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, Travesties, The Real Thing, The Coast of Utopia, another of my favorites, and Leopoldstadt, which was prompted by when his mother died, or soon after his mother died, his family contacted him, and it turned out he did not know that he was Jewish. And he found out from this relative that all 4 of his grandparents died in the camps. And this play is a sort of a tribute to that part of his life that he didn't know anything about. He also wrote the screenplay for Brazil, Empire of the Sun, Anna Karenina, and one of the Indiana Jones films. So he's just a very prolific writer. Now let's see if we can move on from Tom. Samuel Beckett was born, I want to say, sort of at the turn of, in 1906. This is tiny print here. I should put my glasses on. And Beckett, we'll see the connection in a minute, received the Nobel Prize in Literature probably as much as anything for Waiting for Godot. He wrote a number of novels that are very challenging and a number of other plays. And basically, let's see, I've had a line about that I thought was, the Nobel Prize Committee said, for his writing, which in new forms for the novel and drama is about the destitution of modern man acquiring its elevation. Well, I have to tell you, I don't really see that in Waiting for Godot. There's certainly destitution, but not much elevation there. And it's also sort of interesting that Samuel Beckett began his career as an assistant or research aide to James Joyce and helped him with all of those arcane references in Finnegan's Wake. And I bet if I asked for a show of hands now, there wouldn't be many hands that came up for Finnegan's Wake, a very challenging novel. All right, now let's see. I got it through all that and that. So here's a summary from, I forget which theater review. 2 minor characters from the play Hamlet stumble around unaware of their scripted lines and unable to deviate from them. And that really is the horror of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. They're not in charge, but something is, and they are driven through, well, the plot of Hamlet, even though they really try hard to get free of that. Now, there is a film of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which came out in its 25th anniversary. It's now probably close to its 60th anniversary. And I just thought you'd be interested in the people who chose to be a part of it. Gary Oldman was Rosencrantz, and Tim Roth was Guildenstern, and the chief player was Richard Dreyfuss. So it was a fascinating film. I have 2 copies of it. If you want to borrow that, you can do that as well. Most recently, it's been on the London stage with Daniel Radcliffe, I think, playing Rosencrantz. So enough of all that. Now let's see. So let's see if I can do this. So it's fascinating to me how thoroughly the tragedy of Hamlet seems to set us up for our lifetime and for the thinking about the meaninglessness of life. In Hamlet, there is chaos and a lust for power. There is tragic downfall. We all know that in classic tragedies, the downfall is usually because of personal flaws and faults and fate over which the character has no control. there is a back and forth between the feudal order and the idea of justice, revenge, and individual agency. You may not remember, I didn't. There are 3 fathers who die in the tragedy of Hamlet. Fortinbras, who is the Norwegian king who was defeated by Hamlet's father. Hamlet's father, who was poisoned by his brother, who became king and married King Hamlet's wife Gertrude. And Polonius, sort of the chief courtier, father of, am I going to get this right? Ophelia and Laertes, who was sort of accidentally killed by Hamlet. And of course, that's only the beginning of the dying, as most of you know. Everybody on stage, when the play comes to an end, is dead. Anyone of significance is dead, except for Horatio, who's been Hamlet's stalwart supporter and interpreter, and Fortinbras, the son of the dead king, who is now king of Norway, and even off-stage characters have died, including Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So the play really seems to be a lot about the existential crisis, about individual freedom, about not being captive of others, about introspection. Some people accuse Hamlet of being just completely wishy-washy, and other people say that he's a deep thinker and that he's, and part of the wishy-washiness is he had a chance to kill Claudius and he didn't do it. It's almost like he really watched from a distance and thought Claudius might redeem himself somehow. Fascinating up and down, back and forth. There's moral ambiguity throughout the play, certainty and doubt. So it's just I love Hamlet, but I think I find that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead gave me a lot more access to that play. Okay, now the characters. You know probably that that Hamlet opens with King Hamlet's ghost, who demands that his son avenge his death. And then, of course, it is clear that Gertrude, the widow of Hamlet and Hamlet's mother, remarried awfully quickly, but as scholars often remind us, that's what you would do in those times for your own survival and for the survival of the state. Claudius was old Hamlet's brother and killed him by pouring poison in his ear, which is recapitulated by a play within the play later in the plot. Okay, some people have guessed whether Shakespeare named Hamlet because of some family dynamics. Shakespeare had a son named Hamnet, Hamnet, who died at age 11 before the play was written. And you know how scholars are. Some of them want to say, the whole tone of his writing changed after the death of his son. Other people say, well, it certainly didn't become more morose because some of his best comedies were written after the death of his son, whatever. Horatio can be translated as timekeeper, and of course time is a real tyrant in existential literature as well as in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Polonius, I think, can be translated as from Poland, and I don't think we really know anything about Polonius's background. Ophelia and Laertes, his children. And then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, actually there is a translation of each, a pretty close approximation of their names. Does anybody have a guess about what Rosencrantz would mean? It means rose grower or rose wreath. And what about Guildenstern? It's a little easier. Golden star, that's correct. And in the 1500s, 10% of the Danish royalty were either named Rosencrantz or Guildenstern. Go figure. Because I always wondered, why did Hamlet need to choose such inaccessible names? Shakespeare. And then, of course, there are the players and the play within a play, which is what tweaks the conscience of Claudius, but also sets in motion his effort to murder his stepson. And Fortinbras, as we said before, arrives at the end of the play. It's not really clear what he wants to do. I don't think he's looking to conquer Denmark the way it seems King Hamlet had wanted to conquer Norway. But anyway, those are basically your characters. Now let's see if I can go on to the next one. So some of the things that you can note in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which are fun or confusing or both, there are coin tosses. What happens in the film, and I like the way the film opens, is that the two title characters are riding in on horseback very slowly on a desolate cliff, coming down a cliffside trail, and Rosencrantz looks down and sees a gold coin on the path. So he gets down off of his horse, picks up the coin, and flips it. Now, this is not quite the way it happened in the play, but I'm going to stick with the movie. He continues flipping it. We don't have to watch them all, but there are 90 heads in a row when he calls attention to that. 90 of them. And by the time the players arrive, which isn't too much after that, it gets up to 157 heads in a row. So that's sort of being stuck in the loop of time and or fate, where you just don't have no control over it. They're both bewildered, but Guildenstern loses more because he starts tossing his own coins, and they continue to be heads, and Rosencrantz puts all the money in his purse. There's a lot of wordplay, and I'm not sure I'm going to give you the best example now. We may see a little bit of it in the preview when we look at that. There's a lot of talk about death as destiny by all the figures, and how to escape it, and that continues. The characters, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, sometimes think, well, everybody dies, we'll leave it alone. I don't think I'm going to repeat myself. When they discover that they're carrying a letter with Hamlet to the King of England, demanding that he immediately execute Hamlet, they don't tell their oldest friend, Hamlet. They rationalize with one another. It wasn't their idea, of course, but everybody dies, and what could we really do to change the course of things anyway? But Hamlet overhears Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in this conversation, and when they doze off, he comes out and replaces their letter with a letter which asks the King of England to kill whom? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, because Hamlet has no idea that they weren't in cahoots with Claudius, his stepfather. There's a scene in this part that we're talking about. They're on a boat. They're on their way to England, and that act opens in total darkness, and they hear a little bit of water, and I guess they feel the boat rocking, and they figure out where they are. And I think it's Guildenstern, who is the intellect of the two, says, don't you think, no, I think it's Rosencrantz who says, isn't a boat a lot like destiny? And Guildenstern, I'm going to get them, see, I do it too. Everybody gets them confused. But anyway, the smarter, more intellectual of the two says, no, death is destiny, and a boat is a comfort from destiny, because we're contained, and there will be darkness, and as long as we're on the boat, we're probably safe. Although that doesn't work out that way either, because pirates attack the boat, and while the attack is going on, Hamlet, who's already exchanged the letters, jumps onto the pirate ship, and I guess somehow persuades them to take him back to Denmark. But the boat, I guess, throws off the pirates somehow and continues to England, where it seems that the King of England did what he was commanded to do by the King of Denmark. My favorite gimmick in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is, I think the play I saw had a big old steamer trunk, at least that's what we would call it, full of costumes. It probably belonged to the players or the tragedians, as they say in British. But later in the play, the two main characters and the player, who's the head tragedian, are hiding. I guess it was from the pirates. And when the pirates are gone, they peek out of their three different things. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who jumped into this barrel, are now over there in that barrel. And the tragedian comes up out of the steamer trunk, and they talk for a little while, and then he gets out of the steamer trunk and claps his hands, and 14 tragedians come out of the trunk after him. You've probably all seen that gimmick at some point, but I loved doing that with my 9th grade students in school in North Carolina. There's a game that they play. Let me see if I've skipped anything. Yeah, both Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are easily confused. When Claudius says, "Welcome, Rosencrantz," Guildenstern bows. And then Gertrude tries to correct her husband, and it gets it wrong still. The wrong person bows. And so they don't know who they are, and nobody else does either. Hamlet confuses the two. They don't look at all alike, but that's what happens. It's another way of being trapped, I guess, in fate, is that, and it's fun to watch what's the newest way we're going to see these two confused. They play at questions. You all know that game where you ask a question and the person answers with a question, and you lose a point when you forget an answer with a statement. So that is a lengthy process in one part of before they go off to England. Just a lot of fun, and I think I mentioned earlier they do a lot of rationalizing. They try to explain fate or what's happening to them in some way that's a little more tolerable than the horror of it, and yet they continue to be carried along by a kind of arbitrary chaos in their lives. I was going to tell you one more thing, but it's gone out of my mind. Maybe it'll come back. It probably doesn't sound hilarious to you. In a minute, we're going to look at a trailer from the film, and I do have 2 copies of the film that Gary Oldman and Tim Roth and Richard Dreyfuss were in. So I think I already told you that. So you know it got some of the best in the play. Do I want to tell you this next? Okay, let's look at a few of the viewpoints that are sort of carried forth by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They look at power and judgment, because clearly Hamlet's biggest problem is that his father has asked him to commit revenge. And so there's the honorable relationship with his father's ghost, as well as the horror of what his mother has done and what his uncle has done, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that whole power, judgment, violence as either punishment or vengeance. And then it seems that there's a dichotomy between the people in the play who are judges and autocrats and other people who sort of recognize or are forced to recognize that they are humble human beings. And the only way to avoid being stuck is by being alone. And that gets us into existentialism, which we'll talk about in a moment just a little bit. But free will doesn't change your reality. It may help you move inward and to control the things within yourself that you have more control over than your environment, which is a sort of interesting thing to think about in our own lifetime or even in the present moment. And there's a lot of ambiguity and doubt for these characters. So let's see what else I wanted to tell you. So the theater of the absurd, which I'm not sure whether Tom Stoppard would accept that as his fold of dramatists, because he latched on to Hamlet. And one of the only reasons that it ends up feeling like the theater of the absurd is because things keep happening over and over. The tragedians come upon Rosencrantz and Guildenstern before they get to Elsinore, where the royal court is located. And they're all men, except, Alfred always takes the female role. And let's see, then when they get to the court, I think it's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern who tell both Hamlet and Claudius about these players and how they might make a really interesting entertainment. So Hamlet gets the players to agree to act out the murder of Gonzago. And if you know Hamlet, you know that that's the story of Claudius killing his brother, really. I mean, I don't think there's any evidence of there really being a play called The Murder of Gonzago. But anyway, they acted out first for Hamlet, who makes a few adjustments, and then in the movie, they have a puppet show of the same plot for Claudius and Gertrude and the whole court, and Claudius leaves the room screaming, and that's when he arranges for Hamlet to be carried off to England. How did I get a thought? Oh, and then I was going to say the tragedians then show up on the boat. Their explanation isn't really that clear. It's almost like they're like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They're not in charge, and here they are also on the boat. But on the boat, they act out the death. Well, the whole scene with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who opened the letter to read it aloud again, and of course the names have changed on the letter. So then the actors act out their death by hanging. So it's, anyway, I'm not sure I presented about what I love about it. I was going to say a few more things about the theater of the absurd and existentialism, and then I'll get John Brown to play the trailer. We don't have that much more to go if you want to set it up. I can be interrupted. But other characteristics of the theater of the absurd, all of the traditions of theater, as one knew it, are challenged and changed. There's not much logic to it. And as I said, the repetitious cycle often makes people think it's anti-dramatic and anti-character because it's very little character development. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern don't change even with all these things that are happening to them. And I'll tell you a little bit about existentialism once we, what I think connects with this, once we see whether we're going to watch the trailer. Do we need a little more time? You want me to keep going? Oh, okay. So I, because of my interest in 20th century French literature, read a lot of Sartre and Camus and Beckett. You know, Beckett was Irish, but he wrote almost everything he wrote first in French. Now, why would someone do that? He was not a native French speaker. Anybody have any idea? There is a good reason, I think. He felt that it completely simplified his language to use his limited French vocabulary to get his ideas across. So it has been, most of his works have been produced in France and in England and America and later in Germany. And I think I learned that he'd even learned a little German because of, well, I'm not sure how that happened. So basically, an absence of personal freedom, an absence of freedom in society, but a wielding of personal freedom by going inside oneself and making deliberate choices that have nothing to do with or that go counter to what happens to us.
Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation? Since nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was.
Heaven make our presence and our practices pleasant and helpful to him.
Aye. Amen.
I want to go home. Don't let them confuse you.
I am but mad north and northwest when the wind is southerly. I know a hawk from a handsaw.
Exactly. Exactly what?
Exactly why?
Exactly why what?
What?
Why? Why what exactly?
Why is he mad?
I don't know.
Will you walk out of the air, my lord?
Into my grave?
Indeed, that is out of the air.
Glean what afflicts him.
Me?
Him.
How?
Question and answer.
So your uncle's the king of Denmark?
That's right. And my father before him.
His father before him?
No, my father before him.
But surely,
You may well ask.
your father, whom you love,
dies, you are his heir. You come back to find that hardly was the corpse cold before his young brother popped onto his throne and into his sheets, thereby offending both legal and natural practice. Now, why exactly are you behaving in this extraordinary manner?
I can't imagine.
An audience! Tragedians, at your command. We can do you rapiers, or rape, or both.
We're still finding our feet.
I should concentrate on not losing your head.
I like him not, therefore prepare you. I your commission forthwith will dispatch, and he to England shall along with you.
It is an exact command from the King of Denmark, for several different reasons importing Denmark's health and England's too, that on the reading of this letter, without delay, I should have Hamlet's head cut off. I could jump over the side. That'll put a spoke in their wheel.
Unless they're counting on it.
I shall remain on board. That'll put a spoke in their wheel.
My name is Guildenstern, and this is Rosencrantz.
I'm sorry. His name is Guildenstern, and I'm Rosencrantz.
We aim for the point where everyone who is marked for death dies.
Who decides?
It is written.
Audiences know what to expect, and that is all they are prepared to believe in.
What are they?
They're dead.
Wasn't that the end?
You call that an ending? With practically everyone still on his feet? My goodness, no. Over your dead body.
I thought I was going to be able to edit a few more portions to share with you, but, you know, technology, it didn't work out that way. So I'm pretty much done, although maybe there'll be some other things that come up while we're talking. Are there any questions or comments? Well, I have to admit, I felt, how do I put it, captivated. Oh, how did it affect my life, this, what happened with the plays and existentialism, et cetera? I found it very seductive, existentialism. You know, it was a new way of living your life, to be heroic and to, you know, to make your own decisions, et cetera. But I think I also felt a little bit like a coward because I went off to seminary. And it's not that I ever stopped believing in God, but you know, the reality is that faith is belief without proof in many ways. And so that has been my career, and I don't regret it at all. I still lift up these things because I think belief without proof is challenged every day. And so it's not like, I used to talk about people who liked to know the 10 ways to know that Jesus Christ really existed. Well, that's a kind of a weakness there in itself because those are made-up answers, right? But anyway, I think faith is a powerful existential behavior in the end. And so I didn't become a lawyer, and I went another way. Turns out, you heard that I trained in psychoanalysis. Let me get this right. Samuel Beckett, after he stopped working for James Joyce, did 2 years of psychoanalysis. Now, I don't know how it helped him, but you know, that was a part of his life and experience. Any other comments or questions? A little bit, yes. The players, and you know, I believe that Monty Python would have picked up from this, not the other way around. You know, the play, it's not, you know, it's carefully crafted, but it's much more of a hoot than I could describe in my comments, or even than this shows. It's hard to see it. How many of you think you might go see the movie? Because it's available on Netflix. So you can just go onto Netflix and ask for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Susan can't believe it. I watched it 4 times, didn't I? Of course, I was getting ready for this. Another question? Yes.
My kids, when they were 6 and 10, were obsessed with this film. They watched it over and over and over.
Wow.
And I think it was equal parts the physical gag,
yes.
pirates, you know,
Right. Well, and you made me think of something else. You know, everybody dies, and they're dead, except for the player. Let me think now. I think Guildenstern kills the player, and then the player gets up, and all the tragedians applaud, and he shows them he's got a fake knife, you know, the one that retracts into itself. But I don't know why. Maybe the kids would have loved that scene, I would think. And somebody else had a comment over here? Yes.
You mentioned Beckett and you mentioned Stoppard and the two plays. Can you talk a little bit about the links that you see between the two?
Certainly. Waiting for Godot is a very bleak play. It starts with an empty stage, two figures in rags, and one tree with no leaves on it. But they are waiting for Godot to arrive, and they can't go anywhere until that being does arrive. Three-quarters of the way through the first act, they meet Pozzo and Lucky, who are sort of like reflections of the two of them. Let me get this right. Estragon is sort of addlepated and passive and hysterical. Vladimir is intellectual and seeking answers and reasons, etc. Pozzo is like Estragon, the one who comes in, and he's got Lucky on a rope. He's a slaveholder. He's got and that's sort of interesting. I don't know how Beckett decided to do that, but sort of makes it sort of interesting in the American experience. Anyway, they go on off this way, and then a boy comes and says, he's sorry, Mr. Godot can't make it, he'll be there tomorrow. And I think it's Vladimir who says, but didn't you tell us that yesterday? And that's the cyclical thing that, because of the play within a play, repeating again, there's that there. And the meaninglessness of vengeance or whatever is tried to accomplish. The second act, and there are only two acts in Waiting for Godot. In the second act, there are 5 leaves on the tree. And people think, oh, there's some hope coming. No. Pozzo and Lucky come again from the same, they went out that way, they come back from the way they came in the first place. This time the rope is much shorter, and Pozzo is blind now, and therefore more hysterical and panicky than ever. And Lucky has the longest monologue in the whole show. That was in Act 1. When Vladimir puts his bowler hat on top of Lucky the slave, Lucky begins to expound. It's like 3 pages of what do we call that? Monologue or soliloquy. And most of it makes no sense. It's the only place in the whole play that God is mentioned. And I don't think in Waiting for Godot there are any mentions of God. So that's sort of interesting. But yeah, it's those two characters who really echo the 4 characters in Waiting for Godot. And each of them, when it's over, you can say, well, do we have any hope from this? Is there a moral? Well, maybe the existential moral. You have to find meaning in yourself and not by following your fate or the orders of the king or whatever. So, and I really do have almost all of his plays. I thought I was going to read them all before I came to you. I have a reading disability in my advanced years, so that didn't get done, but I'm looking forward to reading the ones that nobody comes in and wants to buy or borrow. He's just an amazing dramatist. Well, thanks for listening. And I hope you'll give either of those plays a shot.